What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Three Body Problem on Netflix, the new science fiction drama series from David Benioff and D.B. Weiss and Alexander Wu. Of course, this is Benioff and Weiss's follow-up series following the conclusion of Game of Thrones, and Benioff and Weiss have once again tackled a, quote, unadaptable piece of narrative. In this case, this would be Liu Cixin's blockbuster 2008 novel, The Three Body Problem, the first in a trilogy. And much like Game of Thrones, The Three Body Problem and its greater story has been described as impossible to adapt from book to screen because of its really dense storytelling. In this case, Three Body Problem is very heavy, hard sci-fi, specifically deep in astrophysics, quantum physics concepts, and just the presentation of this type of storytelling on screen versus the page is quite daunting. But Benioff and Weiss, I give them a lot of credit for not taking their foot off the gas. It's been a minute, right? It's been a while since Game of Thrones came off the air at this point, 5 years, but they really, I think, took another big swing once again. And Netflix took a big swing as well. This is actually their most expensive series they've ever produced. 160 million / 20 million in episodes, big series. Three Body Problem, it's been adapted actually recently. Tencent made a version of the show as well. But in this case, you have Netflix, Benioff and Weiss, and Alexander Wu, who of course created the Terror and worked on True Blood. A very talented group here. But this is a Hollywood production, right? So they made a lot of changes to the source material. And I think it's very interesting to think about this series as a piece of adaptation because Three Body Problem, of course, is a very Chinese story, Chinese novel written by a Chinese author featuring Chinese characters. And in this case, a lot of characters, their names have been changed. We've combined characters, created new composite characters. Really, I think trying to tackle the show in the television format required some changes. And it's also been, I think, diversified a little bit versus being a strictly Chinese-based series, although China is still a very big part of the storytelling. Ultimately, I think Three Body Problem on Netflix, the first season, is a success. It is not a show without fault, but I think it's a pretty impressive piece of adaptation. Benioff and Weiss have really earned this reputation now at this point of knowing how to tackle hard-to-adapt material and making necessary changes and switching up how they went about the storytelling behind Three Body Problem is quite impressive to me. Changing characters, making it a bit more multicultural, but really just kind of combining the narratives and finding ways to dramatize this incredibly hard sci-fi material, but also a very challenging conflict where the enemy, the villain of your series, of your narrative, is literally 400 years away. So they're not interacting directly with your protagonist. But I think ultimately the show is successful. I think it starts incredibly, and it's a much better start to the series than how it ends. But I'm hopeful for a second season and what this show can become. Just kind of going through each episode here. Episode 1, oh my god. Amazing pilot episode. Honestly, standout, knockout first episode. Starting us right off the bat with a really harrowing scene. It's the height of the Cultural Revolution in China in 1966. It's very harrowing. And we're watching a young Dr. Yi watch her father be killed for being an intellectual, basically. And it is graphic. It is scary. And I think it's very well done. It's tasteful, but it doesn't shy away from the horror of something like that happening. And it does a good job of communicating why this character in her, youth would certainly be radicalized to a point of not trusting and believing in humanity. So thus, when presented with an opportunity in episode 2 to contact a alien race off-world, they would take that opportunity, even if that puts the whole, existence of humanity at risk. I think that first episode really nails it. Meanwhile, of course, we get introduced to basically the central characters of the show, the Oxford Five, so to speak. And I think that was a key decision on the part of the creators behind Three Body Problem, where you kind of ground all the scientists together by them being friends, them having known each other, them being connected. And it's quite the kind of eclectic group. You have Giovanna Depo as Saul, John Bradley as Jack Rooney, Isaac Gonzalez as Augie, Jess Hong as Jin, Alex Sharp as Will. And they're all kind of different. They all kind of represent different things. I think if there's a weakness to Three Body Problem, it's that the characters are, I wouldn't call any one character like super rich. And that's also been something commonly said about the book, from what I understand as well. So the star of the show in the book, from what I understand, is really the concept. It's really the narrative. It's really the hard sci-fi of it all. But the characterization is not a strength or major concern of the book. So it's a challenge to make it into the show, because you need character on any TV show, obviously. And I think these characters, they're good enough. Ultimately, like, I think some of the like dramatic beats, so to speak, I don't say they fall flat, but some of them work better than others. And as the show starts to pick up, there's a clear inflection point with Three Body Problem, which is episode 5, where the show really becomes a different show entirely for its last 3 episodes. And what happens to a lot of our core characters in those last 3 episodes, it was a bit up and down for me. Ultimately, like, I think the first half of the series, or the first, almost 2/3 of the series, that does the best job, I think, at hooking you in like the general sci-fi of it all. Particularly the first 2 episodes, which really grabbed me. Of course, episode 1, like I said, amazing beginning. It ends with the universe, quote, winking at everyone. It's kind of like a mind-blowing moment, right? And then episode 2 ends with, in flashback again, the 60s, Dr. Yi basically imprisoned in this Chinese research station, and she comes in contact via like the radio with the Santi, the foreign alien world. And she gets a message that a pacifist of the Santi received this message, and she should be lucky that someone else didn't get it instead. Don't contact them again. Those like 2 episodes in tandem to me were, there's like a lot of like holy shit, like jaw-dropping moment stuff. And I think that's what you love about sci-fi TV. That's what you love about blockbuster TV, is stuff like that. And then from here, the show kind of crystallizes into like what it's about. It's about this alien world or alien race that is coming to Earth because their planet is dying, and we get introduced to that, I think, in a very interesting way, which is this presentation of this advanced VR technology that various characters interact with, putting on their fancy Oculus headsets. But this immersive world, which I think the CGI on that is up and down. It's okay. It looks pretty cool, but like it still clearly looks very digital. We get the presentation of the Leonardo DiCaprio moment, what is the Three Body Problem, right? And the characters determine that themselves, and they come to realize, the origins of this crazy VR tech. Of course, it's from the aliens, and the reason it's there is because they want scientists to determine, what's going on with the world, how do you fix things, et cetera, et cetera. And next thing you know, we learn about this basically, I won't say doomsday cult, but cult, Santi-loving cult, that are going to prep Earth, prep humanity for the arrival of the Santi. And it's almost like there's a religious following to it. And who is running this show? Who's running this group? None other than Dr. Yi, as an adult, played by Rosalind Chow. And at that point, we had also learned that a character she had met in previous flashbacks, Mike Evans, this environmentalist figure. Turns out he is also on board and a big part of the support, a big part of this instance, and as an older man in the present timeline is played by Jonathan Pryce. Of course, this makes three Game of Thrones alumni on the series. Of course, Liam Cunningham is also a big part of the show, and John Bradley, who's not on the show the entire time, but provides a lot of fun comic relief while he's on the show. And I think at that point, it's like the board has been seen, right? You understand what's going on, and you understand that the aliens were actually trying to stop humanity's progress to ensure that by the time the Santi do arrive in 400 years, humanity has not evolved so far that they're actually stronger than these aliens 400 years from now, given the rate of humanity's scientific development. Pretty compelling. Kind of wow with the Judgment Day stuff at episode 5, watching Augie's nanofibers cut through basically the entire cult, killed everyone, including Price. And from there, you've seemingly vanquished the primary antagonists in the short term on the show, and there's 3 more episodes on the season. And the show really kind of flips from there and is about, and there's like a huge ethical component to it about like what would you do if you knew that humanity's very existence was in grave danger, but not for another 400 years. So many generations in the past that no one you know would have anything to do with that for multiple generations. It's like, it's compelling. And I was pretty invested at this point in Jin's character. I think that's probably the most fully realized. I think the stuff with Saul, so sidelined to the very end of the series. I think the Augie character, kind of up and down. Liam Cunningham's character, Will. I think at this point, like there's some narrative leaps in terms of what's going on in the world, what's going on in humanity. They kind of just have to go with, but eventually we understand the global unrest when the Santi really reveal themselves to everybody with the bugs message and the eye in the sky, so to speak. I think there's a lot to recommend and like about Three Body Problem. I think a big part of my admiration for it is the fact that it's like a largely successful example of heavy adaptation where a lot of choices had to be made and a lot of them work out. But ultimately, like the lack of like consistent character does hold the show back, and I think it's an interesting place for a series to conclude its first season, first of you assume 3 or 4, where again the antagonists are so far out in the future. Or are we almost in like a Foundation, Isaac Asimov situation where we have to advance this show many years, decades, hundreds of years? Are we how sci-fi are we going to get? And Benioff and Weiss have effectively teased that this show, this story, does have a quote Red Wedding type event in it, in the same way that all Game of Thrones had to do was get to that point and then they were golden, right? That's kind of what they're alluding to with Three Body Problem. So I hope we get there. I don't see how Netflix would cancel this show despite its heavy costs, because it's been in its top 10. I don't know if it's been number 1 per se. It's not as big a hit as Avatar: The Last Airbender was back in February, for example, for Netflix, but they've invested so much and has also got a lot of critical attention. And I think it's a bit polarizing overall as a show, but it's got a lot of raves as well. And that's a big criticism of Netflix, right? That they don't have enough like culturally relevant, culturally valuable stuff on the platform, right? Especially as we know their strategies have been changing under Bella Bajaria, right? They're going to peel back on the film front, and they're going to invest in certain kinds of stuff, and maybe they're just slaves to their own algorithm and we don't exactly know what they're going to do, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be the most artsy stuff ever. And Three Body Problem, I think despite some of its faults, I think it's certainly worthy of continuing after all it's been invested in it, and the great potential of the future of making this series, again, given the fact that you have 2 more books to adapt. So I'm very hopeful that they will continue it, and I kind of think they would. I mean, Benioff and Weiss have a large overall deal at Netflix. This is the first thing they've produced for Netflix out of that deal. I think in terms of getting that ROI on expensive creators you have in-house, it's probably in your best interest to let them see this through. So I'm rooting for the show, and I'm very hopeful to see more, and I'm actually kind of pretty tempted to read the books as well. So yeah, let me know, how'd you feel about Three Body Problem? Did you like it like me? I'm not a book reader. If you're a book reader, what did you think? And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.